Last summer, I harvested a watermelon that tipped my bathroom scale at just over 47 pounds, and it came off a vine that was only 93 days old. Now, to put that in perspective, the year before, growing the same variety the conventional way, my biggest fruit topped out around 28 pounds and took closer to 115 days. The difference was not a new fertilizer, not some exotic seed, and not some gimmick. It was a pruning and vine training technique that Chinese commercial watermelon growers have been using for decades, one that fundamentally changes how the plant allocates its energy. I stumbled onto it while reading a translated agricultural bulletin from Xinjiang province, where farmers routinely produce melons in the 40 to 60 pound range on compact trellis plots. And once I understood the science behind why it works, I realized I had been fighting my watermelon plants for years instead of working with them. Today, I'm going to walk you through the entire method from soil preparation to harvest, with every measurement and timing detail you need to get oversized watermelons in a surprisingly short window. And stay with me to the end because I will share a pollination technique that Chinese growers use to virtually guarantee fruit set on your strongest vines, one that most Western gardening resources completely overlook. Now, I want to be honest with you. For the better part of 15 years, I grew watermelons the way most of us do. I would direct sow seeds into a mound, let the vines sprawl wherever they wanted, maybe side dress with some 10-10-10 fertilizer a couple of times, and hope for the best. Some years I got decent melons. Most years I got a pile of undersized fruit and a tangled mess of vines that had burned through their energy producing dozens of small melons instead of a few magnificent ones. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. I was right there with you, and I genuinely thought that was just how watermelons grew. Then I started experimenting with targeted vine pruning after reading how Chinese growers manage their plants, and the very first season, I saw something that completely reset my thinking. A single plant, given the right conditions and the right training, will pour all of its considerable energy into one or two fruits instead of scattering it across 8 or 10. And those fruits grow faster, sweeter, and dramatically larger. Here is the core principle that makes this entire method work. And once you understand it, everything else will make perfect sense. A watermelon vine is essentially an energy pipeline. The leaves photosynthesize sunlight into sugars, and the plant distributes those sugars to every growing point, every secondary vine, every flower, and every developing fruit. When you let a plant run wild, it might set 8 to 12 fruits simultaneously, and each one is competing for the same finite pool of energy. Research out of China Agricultural University has shown that when you restrict a watermelon plant to a single main vine with 1 or 2 carefully selected lateral branches and limit fruit set to just 1 or 2 melons per plant, sugar concentration in the remaining fruit increases by as much as 30%, and individual fruit weight can double or even triple compared to unpruned plants. The plant is not producing more total energy. You are simply directing all of that energy into fewer, better fruits. After testing this for 3 seasons now, I consistently get melons in the 40 to 50 pound range from varieties that are listed as producing 25 to 30 pound fruit. The science is straightforward, and the results are remarkable. Now, let me walk you through exactly how to set this up, starting with soil preparation, because this technique demands a lot from the plant in a short window, and the foundation has to be right. The first thing you need to understand is that this method pushes the plant hard, which means the root zone has to be loaded with nutrition and moisture holding capacity before you ever put a seed in the ground. Here is what I do. About 3 to 4 weeks before my last frost date, I dig out a planting hole roughly 18 inches deep and 24 inches across. Into that hole, I mix about a 5-gallon bucket of well-aged compost, 2 cups of granular organic fertilizer with an NPK ratio somewhere around 4, 4, 4, or 5, 5, 5, 1 cup of bone meal for phosphorus to support root development and fruit set, and 1 cup of kelp meal for trace minerals and natural growth hormones. I blend all of that together with the native soil right in the hole, then mound it up about 4 to 6 inches above the surrounding grade. That mound is critical because watermelons despise sitting in waterlogged soil, and the raised profile gives you drainage insurance during heavy summer rains. Now, If you're in zones 3 through 5 where your growing season is shorter, you will want to start your seeds indoors about 4 weeks before your anticipated transplant date. Use 3-inch peat pots so you can plant the whole pot directly into the ground without disturbing those sensitive roots. For zones 6 through 9, you can direct sow into these prepared mounds once soil temperature at a 4-inch depth reaches a consistent 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If you do not have a soil thermometer, a good rule of thumb is about 2 weeks after your last frost date. For variety selection, I have had the best results with Crimson Sweet, which is widely available and consistently produces large fruit, and with Sugar Baby if you want a smaller but incredibly sweet melon. The Chinese growers I have studied favour varieties like Jingxin, but those seeds can be hard to source in the United States. Crimson Sweet responds beautifully to this pruning technique. I would avoid icebox varieties like Tiger Baby for this method because they are genetically programmed for smaller fruit and you will not see the dramatic size gains. Now that your soil is ready, here is where the real technique begins. And this is the part that separates this method from conventional watermelon growing. Once your seedling has produced its 5th or 6th true leaf, you need to identify the main vine. This is the central growing stem extending directly from the base of the plant. You're going to keep this main vine and allow only 2 lateral branches to develop. Here is how to choose them. Watch for the first strong lateral shoot that emerges from a leaf node on the main vine, typically around the 4th or 5th node. Let that one grow. Then watch for a second lateral emerging from the opposite side of the main vine, ideally 2 to 3 nodes higher. Let that one grow as well. Every other lateral shoot, every secondary vine, every sucker that pops out from any leaf node, you pinch off when it is still small, about 2 to 3 inches long. You can do this with your thumbnail. Just snap it cleanly at the base. I know this feels aggressive. The first time I did it, I was genuinely nervous I was going to harm the plant, but within a week, you will see the difference. The main vine and your 2 selected laterals will start growing faster, with thicker stems and larger, darker green leaves. That is the plant telling you it has more energy to work with because you stopped it from dispersing resources into a dozen directions. You want to continue this pinching throughout the entire growing season. Check your vines every 2 to 3 days and remove any new lateral growth. It takes about 5 minutes per plant once you get in the habit. Here is where the fruit selection happens, and this is the step that has the single biggest impact on final melon size. This next part is where most people go wrong because it requires patience and a willingness to sacrifice fruit that looks perfectly healthy. Once your vines start flowering, you will see both male and female flowers. The female flowers are the ones with a tiny miniature melon shape at their base. After pollination, those little bulges will start to swell. Here is the discipline. You're going to allow only 1 fruit to develop on the main vine and 1 fruit on your strongest lateral branch for a total of 2 fruits per plant. Some Chinese growers go even further and limit it to a single fruit per plant for competition-sized melons. To select the best fruit, wait until you have 3 or 4 small melons developing on the plant, each about the size of a golf ball. Then choose the 2 that are positioned closest to the base of their respective vines, ideally between the 8th and 12th node from the plant center. Fruit set closer to the root system receives nutrients more efficiently because there is less transport distance. Once you have selected your 2 keepers, remove every other developing fruit by cutting it off cleanly with a sharp pair of pruners. I use micro tip snips for this. Yes, it hurts to cut off perfectly good baby watermelons. I still wince every time. But the remaining 2 fruits will immediately begin growing at a noticeably faster rate, often visibly larger, within just 3 to 4 days. The conventional approach is to let the plant set as many fruit as it wants and hope for the best. What I have found works dramatically better is this deliberate selection process. You are not reducing your harvest, you are concentrating it. Now, if you're finding this approach makes sense and you want to keep learning practical, science-backed methods like this, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos regularly that dig into the why behind techniques like these, not just the what. All right, let us keep going. Now let me show you exactly how to support these developing melons so they reach their full potential. Once your selected fruits are about the size of a softball, it It's time to think about nutrition, water management, and physical support, because a melon growing at this accelerated rate has very specific needs. For feeding, I switch from balanced fertilizer to a high potassium feed once fruit set is confirmed. I use a liquid organic fertilizer with an NPK ratio of around 2:3:6 or 3:4:8, something where that last number is significantly higher than the first two. Potassium drives sugar production and fruit sizing. I apply this as a drench around the root zone, about 1 gallon of diluted solution per plant, every 7 to 10 days. If you cannot find a high potassium organic liquid, you can side dress with 1 cup of sulfate of potash, also called potassium sulfate, scattered in a ring about 12 inches from the main stem and watered in thoroughly. Water management is equally critical. Watermelons need consistent deep moisture during the fruit development phase, roughly 1 to 1.5 inches per week. I use drip. Irrigation set directly at the base of the plant. The key is consistency. Irregular watering, especially a dry spell followed by a heavy rain, causes the fruit to expand unevenly, which leads to cracking and splitting. If you are hand watering, a deep soaking every 3 days is better than a light sprinkle every day. You want that moisture going down 12 to 18 inches where the bulk of the root system lives. Now, here is a physical support detail the Chinese growers are meticulous about. Once a developing melon reaches the size of a cantaloupe, they place it on a small pad to lift it off the direct soil contact. You can use a piece of rigid foam insulation, a wooden shingle, or even a folded up section of landscape fabric. The purpose is twofold. First, it prevents the bottom of the melon from developing ground rot where moisture sits against the rind. Second, and this is the part I did not expect, it allows the bottom of the fruit to ripen more evenly because air can circulate underneath. That pale yellow ground spot on a ripe watermelon will develop a much richer golden color when the fruit is elevated even just an inch off the soil. A richer ground spot generally indicates higher sugar content. About 2 weeks before your anticipated harvest, and for a variety like Crimson Sweet grown this way, that is roughly around day 75 to 80, you want to significantly reduce watering. Cut back to about half your normal amount. This controlled water stress concentrates the sugars inside the fruit and produces a sweeter, denser melon. Chinese growers call this the sweetening period, and it is one of the most important finishing steps. You will know the melon is approaching ripeness when 3 things happen simultaneously. The tendril closest to where the fruit stem attaches to the vine turns completely brown and dry. The ground spot shifts from white or pale green to a deep, creamy yellow. And when you tap the melon with your knuckle, you hear a deep, hollow thud rather than a tight, high-pitched ping. When all 3 indicators line up, you are ready to harvest. Now let me walk you through the most common patterns I see that hold people back from growing truly large watermelons, because I made every single one of these mistakes myself. The first pattern is overplanting and under-pruning. Most gardeners plant 3 or 4 watermelon seeds per mound and then let all of them grow into a tangled mass of competing vines. What works better is thinning to 1 strong plant per mound and then pruning that plant to a managed structure. A single well-pruned plant will outproduce 3 to 4 unpruned plants, competing for the same root space. I did this myself for years and never made the connection until I started tracking yields per plant rather than per garden bed. The second pattern is fertilizing with too much nitrogen during fruit development. High nitrogen fertilizers promote vigorous leaf and vine growth, which is exactly what you do not want once fruit is set. The plant will keep pushing vegetative growth at the expense of fruit sizing. Switching to a high potassium feed after fruit set, like I described earlier, redirects the plant's energy budget toward the fruit. The third pattern is inconsistent watering. I see this constantly, especially in midsummer when life gets busy. 3 days of neglect, followed by a guilt-driven flood of water, is one of the fastest ways to split a developing melon. Set up drip irrigation on a timer if you can. It does not need to be expensive. A simple battery-operated hose timer and a basic drip line cost under $20, and they will save your melons. The fourth pattern is harvesting too early out of excitement. I have been guilty of this more times than I care to admit. A watermelon that looks big and impressive on the vine may still be a week or two away from peak sweetness. Trust those three ripeness indicators I mentioned: the brown tendril, the deep yellow, ground spot, and the hollow thud. All three need to be present. Patience at this stage is the difference between a melon that wows people and one that is just okay. Now, let me pay off that promise I made at the beginning about the pollination technique that Chinese growers use, because this is a detail that I wish someone had told me years ago. In Chinese commercial watermelon production, growers do not rely on bees for pollination of their selected fruit. They hand pollinate, and they do it at a very specific time of day. Here is how it works. Male watermelon flowers open early in the morning, usually between 6 and 9 in the morning, and their pollen is most viable during this window. The female flowers are also most receptive during this same morning period. What Chinese growers do is pick a freshly opened male flower, peel back the petals to expose the pollen-covered anther, and then gently dab it directly onto the stigma in the center of the female flower. They make contact with every surface of that stigma, rotating the male flower as they go, making sure pollen reaches all sides. Then they mark that female flower with a small piece of colored ribbon, so they know exactly when it was pollinated and can count forward to estimate harvest date. The reason this matters so much for our method is that you are being very selective about which fruits to keep. If you rely solely on insects for pollination and a particular female flower gets a poor pollen load, the fruit may start developing but will often be misshapen or will abort a couple of weeks later. Hand pollination virtually guarantees a strong, complete pollen load on the exact flowers you want to develop. I started doing this 2 seasons ago, and my fruit abortion rate dropped from roughly 1 in 3 to almost 0. It takes about 30 seconds per flower, and you only need to do it on the mornings when your chosen female flowers open. It is one of those small investments of time that produces an outsized return. If this video helped you rethink how you grow watermelons, I would love for you to share it with a gardening friend who might benefit from it. Drop a comment below and let me know what varieties you are growing this season, or if you have tried any pruning techniques on your melons before. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would be grateful if you did. I put a lot of care into making sure every video gives you something practical you can actually use in your garden. So give this method one honest season. Start with just 2 or 3 plants, prune them with confidence, select your fruit deliberately, and let the plant show you what it is truly capable of when all of its energy goes exactly where you want it. I think you are going to be genuinely impressed when you set that first melon on the scale. Until next time, happy growing.